Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for our Budgeting and NetSuite webinar. My name is Daisy Morales. I'm the account executive here at 79 Consulting. As the account executive, I'm the point of contact for product demos, sales, customer-facing questions, and the occasional webinar. Throughout this webinar, we'll be walking you through a live demo in NetSuite. We'll be using a dev account, which may be a little slower than you're used to, so please be patient with us. We also have a chat feature where you can ask questions during the webinar. So before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to go over a few things. First, if you have any questions, please feel free to add them to our chat box. We have a special member of our team answering all of your questions in real time. Secondly, we'll be asking a few poll questions throughout this time, and your response is greatly appreciated. And lastly, I'd like to share a little bit of background information on 79 Consulting, which is the sister company of Tvarana. 79 Consulting was created as a way to simplify our name to our clients. Many find it difficult to accurately pronounce Tvarana. Our name was a bit of a tongue twister, so we came up with a new name for ease of use. Hence, as to why this may be the first time you're hearing about 79 Consulting. So as a company, we were founded in 2007 as a Salesforce and NetSuite consulting firm. In 2008, we became a NetSuite solution provider. In 2014, we created our first suite app, SkyDoc, which is a storage solution for NetSuite. We now have over 8 apps on SuiteApp.com and continue to provide support, managed services, and integration services for NetSuite, Salesforce, and Workday clients. And now let me introduce you to today's speaker, Rebecca Narrowdog. Rebecca is our NetSuite principal architect with over 10 years of product experience on NetSuite and much more than that on the business side. She is uniquely qualified to assist our clients with solving their most challenging business processes. Everyone, let's give a warm welcome to Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello, everyone.
So today we will be reviewing budgeting in NetSuite. Did you know that according to a recent survey of 273 companies by Accenture, only 11% are fully satisfied with their planning capabilities compared with 17% 2 years ago and 20% 10 years ago? That's why today we will be discussing why you should have a budget, why you should be using NetSuite to budget, and review a few best practices for budgeting. We will take a look at a business case study on utilizing budgets to manage various scenarios. And finally, we will review some reporting options available in NetSuite. So, Rebecca, can you help us understand budgets by explaining what it means and why they're important?
Sure, Daisy. So a budget will help you understand your cash flow, where you're spending money, where you're making money, and the relationship between expenses and income. A budget helps you communicate your goals to your team. It will help them see where they can play a part in growing the business, as well as understanding your growth goals and vision. A budget can help you guide your businesses in the right direction. You can identify expenses that are inflated, products that are undervalued, and where your company is performing efficiently. A budget can also help you achieve the growth goals you have defined, as well as survive an economic downturn. Budgets are a forward-looking statement that represents where you are driving your business towards. Publicly traded companies use forward-looking statements often when presenting earnings estimates and other income data to their shareholders. Small, non-public companies can utilize the same strategy even though they might not share their budgets publicly. In the end, a budget will make you more money.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. So what are some of the reasons behind using the power of native NetSuite to budget?
Oh, that's a great question. Many businesses that do not budget feel they don't have the time or experience to create a budget. If you're still budgeting in Excel, then moving your budget creation to NetSuite will allow you to strengthen your process and save time. You can use your actual data as a starting point to create a budget with a percentage uplift with a few clicks. This will save you time and ensure that your budget numbers represent reality. So Daisy, let's go through a quick demo on how to set up budgets in NetSuite.
Perfect. Sounds great.
So I'm going to switch over to NetSuite really quick. Give me just a second to get it loaded up here. So again, this is, as Daisy stated, this is a demo account. So we all know some of the performance of a demo account. It's worse than a sandbox if you have a sandbox. So today what we're going to look at is just how to start creating a budget. So if you're an administrator or if you have classic view, you can go to transactions and down to financial and then set up budgets from there. And I already have that pulled up. So let me just click over here. So I wanted to kind of go through this screen with you. These are the options on how you can budget. So if you're a One World user, you start by selecting the subsidiary you want to create a budget for. You would select the year. Sorry, let me select the subsidiary here so something will come up for me. You would select the year that you want to budget for, and these are all based on your fiscal calendars you have set up. You could select the budget category, and I'll come back to this in just a second and explain it more. There's a little more detail there. The currency is driven by your subsidiary. If you're a non-One World user, then you could select the currency you want to build your budget for. So now we get into the details of, do I want a granular budget? If I leave all these selectors blank, I just get a budget for my entire company or my entire subsidiary. But I can go into a lot of detail. So if I have a really large client that I do a lot of work for and I want to budget out and project and plan for that client, I can select the client or the project here. The same for an item. So let's say we're doing a big R&D development project, and I just want a budget to manage that and see how the development of that item is coming along, how all my expenses are tracking, and then finally when it's released to market, how it's doing from a sales point of view. I could do it by item. I can also define by class. So again, I'm going to pick on R&D. If we had an R&D process, we could have a whole budget for the R&D department, or maybe marketing. They often need a budget, right? Plan for marketing, so we can see how marketing is performing against what we've planned for. The same with department. We can pick departments here, and then location. And finally, what we need to look at is what type of accounts do we want to use for our budget. We can just use accounts that are income expense, income or expense, balance sheet account, all existing or all, right? So this is really just what you want to look at. Maybe you are doing an income because you're going to do an uplift on your income of 20%, but on expenses, you only want to do a 30% uplift, so you could create a budget separately for each of those. So that's the primary budget setup. And I wanted to go back and talk about budget categories here. So budget categories are a way to create budgets and label them so you know what you're looking at, and now it becomes a selector for reporting. So if I was creating a budget for my R&D department, I might have a category that says 2020 R&D, right? So here in this demo account, you can see that we have budget categories that are based on the subsidiaries, and then a year, and I have a current. For all our demo purposes, we're going to pick on 2020. But this kind of gives you the idea of what you can see, and the categories just create labels so that now when you're doing reporting, you can select the budget you want to compare for budgets to actuals. Daisy, so that's the brief introduction for getting started with budgets in NetSuite.
So this looks pretty comprehensive, Rebecca. Is it easy to create a budget in NetSuite?
Yeah, it is pretty easy. So along with this, and you're setting it all up manually, you have an option to copy budgets in NetSuite, including copying your actuals data and turning it into a budget. So again, to get to that copy feature, we go transactions, financial, to copy budgets, and I'm a cheater, so I already have it pulled up over here. So this is my screen for copying, right? So I could say I'm going to copy a budget from 1 year to a new year, right? And I'm going to, it's going to keep everything that I had selected in that budget. Which account types, again, I have that same option. And now I can provide a modified by amount, right? So if I want to take my 2019 budget and use it for my 2020 budget, I could just make a copy and uplift it by 25%. That's my growth expectation. So that's copying from a budget. We have the same option of copying from actuals. So we would just change our radio dial selection here. We would pick the fiscal year that we're copying from. So in this example, we would say 2019, actuals from 19 to a budget for 2020. And then I would set my category here to 2020 because that's how I'm working. And now I have the choice, do I want to keep all my segmentation detail, right? Customers, items, departments, class, locations. So I can just unselect this. So I just get a nice flat budget for everything. And then again, select my accounts that I want to use. And I really like all because I just like all. And then I would do modify, what's my uplift want to be? So let's say we're going to be a little more conservative from our actuals to our budget. So we're going to modify or do an uplift of 20%. And then I just hit save and it will go create the budget. It takes about a minute. And that is the primary way that you do that. You can also import budgets. So if you are doing modeling outside of NetSuite and you have it in Excel, you can bring it into NetSuite with an import. It's not, let me show you real quick though, because it's not through the standard CSV import process. It uses an import wizard. So again, if I go transactions, financial, set up budgets, and go to import, excuse me, I'm gonna lose my voice. Go to import here. So now this is where I would import my budget, and there's a template here. So if you wanted to, you would start with the template and it tells you how to set up the budget, so it'll import very easily. And Daisy, that's how easy it is to create a budget and get started in NetSuite.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So thanks. I know that it's very useful for our audience to know that the features that we're discussing are native to NetSuite. So now let's move on to a few budgeting best practices.
Perfect. Daisy, I just want to go back. You'd mentioned that it's native NetSuite. So let me just add something there. All the features that we reviewed are available in native NetSuite without purchasing any additional modules. I know NetSuite all the time is wanting to sell us stuff, so I wanted to just really call that out. If you have NetSuite, then you have all these features available to you. And if you want to use budget categories, you'll just need to have your administrator enable that under enable features. So now, sorry, Daisy, for backtracking there.
That's okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Of course, of course. So let's go on to budgeting best practices. So we surveyed several companies, financial experts in the NetSuite and budgeting space, and asked, what are the best practices as it relates to getting started with budgeting, as well as actual budget creation? The 4 themes below were consistently represented. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but it is a good place to start. First off, be realistic. Base your budget on past results. Look at prior years to determine your growth for the budget cycle. Unrealistic budgeting will not get buy-in from your stakeholders. They will see right through those unrealistic budgets immediately. Second, be conservative. Budgeting growth around 20 to 30% is realistic and manageable. If you grew 50% last year, look at the trends to understand why you experienced that level of growth. Then determine if the same conditions apply before building your budget at the same factor. Be flexible. Review your budgets regularly. Recalculate when necessary. Did you pick up a new large account? How will that impact your budget for the remainder of the year? Did the cost of fuel go up unexpectedly? Factor that into the budget. And finally, be a team. Rely on your leaders and managers and consider their input in the budget. Discuss with them your goals and work together to determine how to arrive at those goals. Your budget should reflect the agreed upon goals.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. Now let's take a closer look at a case study. We reached out to a small business owner who has been budgeting for several years to understand how they use budgeting to attain their goals and ensure they are as close to recession-proof as possible. Rebecca, do you mind going over a few of their recommendations?
Well, that sounds great, Daisy. So when this company began developing budgets, they reached out to trusted business advisors to identify the best practices for their industry, size, and structure. They chose the 4 practices that aligned best with their goals. Each budget process and final budget is measured against these practices. So first off, they start with multiple budgets. Each year, they develop multiple budgets and evaluate these for growth. They utilize the 20 to 30% growth recommendation as their balanced budget. They also develop a surplus budget that represents the growth they would like to achieve above the balanced budget. Finally, they develop a deficit budget as well. This budget gives them the ability to adjust and adapt for worst case scenarios. So on a side note, I'm sure we can all relate to the concept of a deficit or pessimistic budget right now. COVID-19 and the current economic climate has us all looking to that deficit budget. In fact, having this budget in place can ensure that you are making business decisions based on the data available and not on emotions. Throughout the year, so back to our case study, throughout the year, this company evaluates actuals to each of the 3 budget scenarios to determine their performance. Adjustments can be made accordingly. Keeping tabs on how you are performing throughout the year allows you to make wise business decisions as needed. One area to watch is your cash flow. Early identification of significant changes in your cash flow allows you to quickly make business adjustments relying on the data from your budgets. If your cash flow is up, you could institute that surplus budget that allows you to increase your employee profit sharing percentage, or you can invest in that new hire you've been waiting on. The goal, of course, is to make wise business decisions based on data. And finally, they looked at budget directionality. They modeled budgets from both top-down and bottom-up strategies to determine what best fit their business. For the first few years, they built budgets both ways. Over time, they landed on top-down budgeting, where you start with revenue goals and then let expenses fall into line. Bottom-up budgeting is the opposite, of course. Define expenses and then determine what your revenue needs to be.
Thanks, Rebecca. So what kind of reporting is available when you use budgets?
Reporting. And that's the glory of budgets, right? Now you can run some reports and take a look at how you're performing. So after you create or load your budgets into NetSuite, you can run budget versus actual reports to determine how your business is performing. You can review based on the various budget categories you have defined. You could look at the full year, compare quarter to quarter, compare this year to past years. You can even run reports by segment values like department and location. If you're a OneWorld user, running consolidated budget versus actual reports is simple. You can compare your subsidiaries side by side or run for each subsidiary individually. Daisy, why don't we just jump over into NetSuite and take a quick look? I can show you a few report options that are out of the box, no customization required.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so you can see my NetSuite screen, right, Daisy?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. So let's just take a look at budget versus actual. So these are what I'm showing you today is all out of the box. So reports, banking and budgeting, we're looking at the budget versus actual statement right now. So by default, it jumps up. I have it running for fiscal year 2019 because that's where my demo account had some data. So we're just going to look at that. Right now, I have the period set for the entire year, and I'm getting a single set of results. So it's not very often that we look at our budgets in total. So we can change this by changing our column over here and say, I want to look at how I'm performing quarterly. So I can just change to accounting quarter and hit my refresh button. And now my report will run for each quarter. So I'll see my reports for a quarter, amount, budget amount, amount over budget, and percentage of budget. So my numbers hold true for each quarter. I've got Q1, Q2, 3, and 4. And somewhere over here in my non-scrolling NetSuite screen, I'm acting weird today, I have my same total column. So I get all numbers for each 4 quarters, and then I still see my total here. So we can also change the column. So let's say I want to look at the subsidiaries as a whole here, and I'm wanting to see, I'm wanting to see how my subsidiaries are doing side by side. So now I'm just with the flip of my column value. This is pretty standard financial reporting. I think you guys will catch on to that. We have the subsidiaries with the same columns within each subsidiary. And I have a lot of subsidiaries in this demo account, so this is a really wide report. And as I go across, I once again have my total column here for consolidated. So let me just, one more thing, let me show you really quick. Here's my budget category that we talked about. So if I wanted to look at just a specific budget and compare it to actuals, then I could change that category. And we also have more filters here, just like we see in everywhere else in reporting in NetSuite. Now, all those values that we saw over when we were setting up a budget, we can filter by the same values here. And that would be why you would, if you were doing a copy of your actuals, if you left your class, department, and subsidiary and location set, then you would be able to run reports at that level of breakdown as well, without having to have a unique budget for each piece. So that's your budget versus actual. Let me show you the budget income statement. So this is exactly what you would expect. This is just looking at your budget as if it were an income statement. We all review our income statement frequently, and we know how this looks. So this gives us just the ability to look at it by a budget. So it's just changing the view. This document would fall into that forward-looking statement that we were discussing, where we're projecting where we want to be based on our budget. This does not consider actuals. So now I get to do the fun stuff and wow you really quick. Let me just put my column here on my budget to actual back to total. I wanted to just be able to have a simple view here. So we can add a chart, a visual to our budget here in NetSuite. We can show a bar graph, we can show a pie chart or a line graph. I've seen people do it. Boy, this demo account has really bad data. I've seen people do this all different ways. I just think it's a preference. I personally like the bar graph. So we can say I only want to see my top 5 accounts, or I wanted to see my top 50. I'm going to change it to 5 just to spread it out. And then we can also say, what else do we want to see? I want to see my percentage of budget. Now I have a really nice over and under value to just give me a graphical view. I can add another y-axis. Let me put this on a pie chart. So as you can see, it's the standard graphing in NetSuite. This is good and bad, right? I can see it here on the report. I cannot show these budget graphs on a dashboard, though. That's one thing I wish I could do. However, you could grab a screenshot of this and share it with your executives if you want, along with the budget. And with all reports in NetSuite, we can always export them to Excel or create them in a PDF.
Great. Thanks so much, Rebecca.
Sure. So Daisy, along with these stock reports, you can build custom reports to meet your reporting requirements. You can compare last year's actuals with this year's budgets. You can create a report for expenses only. You could compare a quarter from this year to the same quarter from last year. You could even have a report that shows you budget versus actuals for the current period with trailing 3 months. That's an exact article in Suite Answers if anybody wants to build that out. There's an article out there on how to do that. There are a few limitations, though, to budgeting in NetSuite. The scenario modeling we can do a little bit, but if you're trying to really do some in-depth scenarios, NetSuite doesn't do that very well. You can do it outside in Excel and then import it in with that wizard, so that takes care of that. Really, the great news is that everything that you need, NetSuite has built right here on the platform. It's really solid for small businesses to get started with budgeting. Everything you build in NetSuite can be used when you're ready to move to advanced budgeting as well. don't forget those imports. That'll really take you to the next level.
Thanks, Rebecca. So now I'm going to drive it back to Rebecca. She'll be going over a quick demo of our Suite app cash flow statement.
Great. Thanks, Daisy. So let's take a few minutes to look at the cash flow statement Suite app built by Tvarana, 79 Consulting. NetSuite gives your bank balance and cash statement for a period. But how do you forecast your cash position? We developed the cash flow statement Suite app to allow you to do just that with the power of NetSuite. Let's jump back over there and take a quick look. This one's a lot of fun for those of you that like to model your cash flow throughout the period. Here we go. Can you see my NetSuite screen there, Daisy?
I can, thank you.
So this is a Suite app and it's a bundle. So you just, once you purchase it and install the bundle, you can go to here. We see it again under transactions and then down to cash flow statement and across loads this page that I have pulled up. This is how it loads on default. It gives you a date range from today to 30 days out. We can live with that 30 days or we can change it to any date that we want to. I'm just going to go through the end of the month. And then in a One World account, we're now going to pick our subsidiary that we want. So I'm going to pick on US West today. That's my company that we're working with. And now it's going to load. It's going to ask me what currency do I want to look at. So I'm going to say I want to look at USD. And the next thing that it's loading for me is it's looking at all my bank accounts to tell and show me which bank accounts are associated with the subsidiary I chose and the currency I chose. As you know, NetSuite is a one-to-one relationship between subsidiary and bank accounts, and then again for currencies. So now I can see all the bank accounts for this subsidiary that are USD accounts. I can choose which accounts I want to include in my forecasting. So I'm going to choose payroll, operating, both operating. This one is 0, but you can, I just wanted to demo that you can pick various accounts to include in your modeling. So the next thing that it pulls up is it gives me a weekly forecast here. So I can see what my cash flow would be week by week if all these transactions occurred on their due date. So the example here is that, that I have these invoices that I'm going to receive, and I also have expenses down here. I've got an expense report and some vendor bills that are due to be paid. So in this example, I could come through and let's say I'm not going to pay this vendor bill on the 1st of November, and I don't anticipate this customer paying. So I could unselect these, and my model here is going to change to represent the selections that I made. So again, it's just modeling your cash flow. We see the values broken out week by week. It's looking at our cash accounts as well as the transactions we anticipate coming through. So I'm going to try this yesterday. It didn't work today. It didn't work for me last time. We have, I had a permissions issue. We all know those. Let's say we have this large invoice, right? $50,000. And because I'm right here, and I actually have 2 for this customer, different customer, I have this $50,000 invoice. And let's say that, I'm working through this and I see these really large invoices and I just go ahead and take the minute to reach out to the customer and say, hey, are you going to be able to pay this? What's up? And let's say that they tell me that they're going to pay it in December. I can go right here and change this date to December 1st. And it's going to actually update the due date on the transaction for me. I'm not going to have to navigate out to the transaction and then wait for that update to come through. So it's a nice little feature. We can do it right here from the screen. And that is our basic product here. You can also download it if you wanted to do some additional modeling with the data in Excel.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rebecca. This concludes our webinar. Thank you for joining us. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon and participating in today's webinar on budgeting in NetSuite. Here is our contact information should you have any questions regarding this webinar or any of our services or suite apps. Remember, we have team members across the globe to help facilitate your needs. Thank you again, Rebecca, for joining us this afternoon, and everyone have a wonderful afternoon.